What are your thoughts on a two-state solution right now? Unfortunately, there's been a lot of talk from Western leaders talking about their openness to a two-state solution right here and right now. So, take a look at this clip over here with Mike Huckabee talking about the concept of a two-state solution, what that would look like, and his recent visit to Gaza with Steve Witkoff and what the reaction of the people would be. So take a look at this clip. We'll watch it together and then talk about it. But first, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Check this out.
Ambassador Mike Huckabee, fresh off a visit to Gaza with Steve Witkoff, has been kind enough to join us now from Israel. Ambassador, welcome.
Thank you, Brian. It's great to be with you, and I'm so glad you're giving a forum to get the truth out about what's happening in Gaza and who's responsible, because most of the media is filled with some of the worst misinformation and, frankly, just outright lies. And it's very, very harmful, and it's only empowering Hamas and causing our hostages to be kept there longer.
Well, tell me what you saw. I mean, you just said, let me see for myself. You got your security. You went in there with Steve Witkoff. Where did you go? What did you see?
We went into the Rafah area down in the southern part. We were able to look into other parts, but here's what we saw. The GHF food program is working. It's working very well. In fact, today we passed over 100 million meals having been served in 2 months. We kept the president's direction to us when that was set up, and it was simple. Get food to the people, but don't deliver it in such a way that Hamas can steal it. Brian, Hamas has been stealing about 80% of the food. Some say even more than that. And when they steal it and they loot the trucks, then they turn around and they sell it. I'll give you an example. A simple 4-bag kilo of sugar is selling for over $200 in Gaza on the black market because Hamas has stolen most of the food and then they put it out on the black market. Well, people can't afford that. It's a simple thing. Most of the people coming up to the GHF feeding sites will say, wow, this is great. This is the first time I haven't had to pay for the food that's supposed to be humanitarian. It's been disgraceful, and I'm so tired of people saying that the IDF are just shooting people. That is simply not true. There are moments, there have been very difficult environments where maybe you have several thousand people rushing toward an outpost of IDF soldiers. They're first warned verbally, then they're fired a warning shot, and sometimes they keep coming. Sometimes there have been fatalities, but it is never just this random shooting. That's simply not happening. In fact, the IDF has worked very hard. They've offered to provide security to get UN trucks. One of the biggest problems in not getting people fed is the UN. It's been horrible. And they're more interested in pretending to be a humanitarian organization than they are in actually getting food to people who are hungry.
Ambassador, I'm sure you saw the reports over the weekend that Israel cannot prove that Hamas is reselling the provisions. Your thoughts on that? I'm sure you heard that.
Yeah, I've heard it. I've also watched just endless loops of videotape in which that's exactly what they're doing. You know, it's ludicrous for someone to say that. Let's just remember where the source of a lot of this misinformation comes from. The so-called Gaza Health Ministry is actually Hamas. They tell a story, usually false. They hand it off to maybe Al Jazeera. Mm-hmm. That's a Hamas-related entity. The next thing you know, they've told some NGO at the UN this false information, who then gives it to the UN, and the UN reports it, no one having checked it out, no one having verified the veracity of the information. Then all the news outlets say, oh, the UN today confirms that Brian Kilmeade is not the smartest man in the room. Well, we all knew that anyway, but now we have the UN as the source of it, and people are quoting the UN, but they're really quoting Hamas. That's where it all started.
So you do have proof. You're saying that Israel does have proof that Hamas is reselling the aid that you guys are putting in there.
They absolutely do. And in fact, we watched in real time. There are drone cameras all over Gaza. There were steel cameras around that you could watch on the monitors in real time and see trucks getting looted. You could see gunmen getting up on top of the trucks that the UN was bringing in. Look, it's a mess down there. I'm not going to tell you it's a beautiful sight. It isn't. It's a war zone. But it is a war zone, and it is a mess for one reason, because of Hamas. And when President Trump made his statement yesterday and asked Steve Witkoff and me to go to Gaza and see firsthand and deliver for him a report, I can tell you the president gets it right when all of Europe is getting it wrong.
But
President Trump said it's Hamas. And I want to make one quick point here. It's interesting to me that all the European nations are coming together. They're really helping Hamas by demanding a Palestinian state and condemning Israel. Hamas loves that. But do you know who's taken the other side against Hamas? All of the Arab Gulf states, like the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Qataris. That ought to tell you something.
But I know, but they did include in that
understand what's
statement,
going on.
Ambassador, they did include in their statement they wanted moving towards a two-state solution, which we know is farcical. I don't mean to brag, but we did have Secretary of State Marco Rubio on yesterday with this very question about the recognition of a two-state solution, which, by the way, I don't even know what it would look like on paper, let alone in real life. Cut 29. Yeah. We have allies, UK, Canada, and France, all either threatening to or already done recognizing a Palestinian state. That's over 140 in the UN. How does the U.S. view this move?
Irrelevant. It's irrelevant. I mean, it's annoying to some, but it's irrelevant. It doesn't mean anything. First of all, none of these countries have the ability to create a Palestinian state. There can be no Palestinian state unless Israel agrees to it. Number two, they can't even tell you where this Palestinian state is. They can't tell you who will govern it. And I think number three, it's counterproductive.
And that's your point. It's counterproductive. Is it true today? The Times of Israel is saying Israel is warning Hamas it will begin to annex parts of Gaza if they don't get a hostage deal reached. And we did see some hostage video of this young man, 21 years old. Obviously, looks like he's suffering. It looks like something from Auschwitz, horrendous. But your reaction to that report and Marco Rubio's statement?
So proud of the secretary. He's been spot on. When he talked about the fact this is sort of a just pipe dream when these European countries are out there demanding a Palestinian state, I've suggested, look, if France wants to create a Palestinian state, let them do it. Let them put it right there in the French Riviera. It's a nice piece of land. I'm sure people would like to come and go from Gaza and maybe from even Judea and Samaria and go to the French Riviera. So Macron is welcome to offer that if he likes. But you and I were talking back in January before I was sworn in to become ambassador here. And you asked me about a Palestinian state. I said, Brian, we've already had one. There is a Palestinian state. It's called Gaza. That was a absolutely 100% Palestinian state. How did that work out? That's what it will look like.
What about, so right now, there is no talks. Talks broke down about a week ago. So Steve Witkoff comes back. You guys tour Gaza. Now, the President of the United States says, you know, it's hard to fake starving. We know some of the, there were some hoaxes. Sadly, there's some kid born with birth defects. It looks horrible, and they made it seem like that kid was starving. I get it. But you do see human suffering. You care about human beings. You're a pastor, for goodness sakes. You care about human beings first. So if Hamas won't come to the table, have you seen a workable plan? And if is there anything that could be done? For example, the Qataris, pressuring them even more severely, kicking out some of their, the ones that are not in the war zone, out of their country to get them to the table. Can you tell our audience the next step?
Well, the president, I think, had the best next step. He was very clear in saying there needs to be a concerted effort. Here's what ought to happen. The UN ought to join forces with GHF and start getting the food to the people and quit pretending that GHF is ineffective and quit pretending that they're doing a great job. They could work together. It would be helpful. The UN has lots of food. They just don't know how to get it in safely. And they don't like the method of delivery. And they seem to be more focused on how the food gets there than whether or not it even arrives. Well, that's not a hunger-centric issue. They need to take care of the people. Brian, there is suffering there, no doubt about it. But this idea that there is mass starvation on the level that you see on pictures is simply not accurate. One of the things I want to tell you, we talked to Gazans today. You know what they really want? They want the United States to stand with them, to help them have a future. They're sick of Hamas.
So have you been able to interact with any form of leadership with any Palestinian leadership? I don't care if it's whether it's a group leader or anybody in the Palestinian Authority you might deem somewhat respectable.
I've been to Ramallah twice. I've sat down with not just a group of business leaders, but also with government leaders. Uh, I think that there is, look, there's deep philosophical disagreements about a two-state and certain things, but there is also a real desire to see peace and prosperity for the future. But when I sat down with Gazans today, many of these are well-educated people. You know what they want? They just want Hamas out of their lives. They want peace again. They want to build communities where their kids can grow up in safety. They're sick of Hamas. They're sick of the PLO. They're tired of having their lives destroyed by people who treat them as if they don't exist and they're not important.
Have you
But they
seen?
love the United States. And this is what was fascinating to Steve Witkoff and me. They're grateful to President Trump for the things he's saying, for the things he's promising to do. And it was kind of a surprise to us to hear that these are not people that are saying,
Right.
well, you know, we've been for Hamas, but we're not going to be so much anymore. They hate Hamas. They're ready for Hamas to disappear and never be seen again.
So, for example, if a gang took over, if the mob took over my neighborhood, which happened in New York City for decades, really tough to speak up against the mob because you got your family's going to get wiped out. So Hamas is the mob. They're a terrorist mob, perhaps more ruthless, definitely more ruthless than you would find in the mob at its zenith here in New York City and different enclaves. Got it. So how many of them are left? And what is it going to take to get to the next step? Have you seen a plan, even on paper, that would wipe them out, marginalize them, isolate them?
I think you're going to see that very soon, but it's the president's prerogative to release the details, and I expect that you're going to see that. When I say soon, I'm talking not months or weeks, but just in a very few days, where he will outline what he is going to instruct the United States to be a part of. And I think it's going to be celebrated in Gaza by the people who have suffered for 22 months under this absolutely vicious band of savages.
I know. For you personally, there's a story out there that everyone seems to run with. That Prime Minister Netanyahu is subjected to his extreme right. It's not really his policies, but if he doesn't do what the extreme right want him to do in Israel, then he's going to lose his power and he'll lose his base. Could you tell me what the reality is? I can't do inside politics in Israel.
Well, I live with it every day over here, and I can tell you that that's simply not the case. Does he have a right wing in his party and in his government? Of course he does. He also has a left wing. It's kind of like President Trump has to deal with all of the various people who are in the process. But here's the part, Brian, that is just not getting through, and people are not being honest. President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu are closer than I think probably any two world leaders have been. And any attempt to say that they're not on the same page is not true. And President Trump has talked with almost daily the prime minister, and the prime minister is willing to make bold moves to get this all settled. Nobody wants it to be over more than he does, as well as every Israeli wants it to be over. So this notion that Israel wants to continue the war, that's one of the dumbest things I think I've ever heard in my life.
And I keep hearing it. I want you to hear what Richard Haas said from the Council of Foreign Relations. I want to see what your take is. Listen.
The president has political standing in Israel that even Bibi Netanyahu doesn't have. If the president wants to move the needle in Gaza, he can do it. He can put pressure on Israel, not by declaring support for a Palestinian state unconditionally, but by pushing the Israelis to come up with a day after plan, to stop, to open up the area, Gaza to food aid, to stop new settlements in the West Bank. There's a lot of things this president can do if he really.
So your thoughts. I just wanted to get you that take. We're up against a break, but what do you think?
Okay, I'll be real quick and just tell you, Richard Haas is absolutely off base. It is not the Israelis that need the pressure. It's Hamas. And he needs to come over, as Steve Witkoff and I did today. He needs to look and realize the problem, the total obstruction here is Hamas. Israel is doing its part. They're doing more than their part. Can you tell me in the history of the world, any country that was told that they were responsible for feeding the people that murdered them?
Ambassador, the president's made a lot of great picks to put in a lot of good, important places, but I think you might be one of his finest. Ambassador Mike Huckabee, thanks so much.